Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
Sean Bean and Connie Nielsen star in Robin Hood. From Sherwood Forest to the Norman Court, a classic tale reborn for today. The story continues to unfold. New episodes Sundays on MGM+.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and today we're talking with Xanet Pailet. Xanet is a nationally recognized sex and intimacy coach, best-selling author of Living an Orgasmic Life, and the founder of Passionate Intimacy Retreats, where she has led over 100 couples intimacy retreats. After leaving a 26-year sexless marriage and a high-powered legal career, Xanet now helps committed couples who feel stuck, disconnected, or in conflict transform their relationships into ones filled with intimacy, safety, passion, and joy. Through private and international group retreats, she shows couples how to create emotional and sexual connection that lasts. Xanet is a certified somatica sex and intimacy coach, sexological body worker, holistic pelvic care practitioner, Tantra educator, and somatic experiencing trauma practitioner. Her new book, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit, How to Enhance Communication and Create a Lifetime of Passionate Intimacy, will be published in March 2026 by Books That Save Lives. Xanet, I am so excited to welcome you to the show today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Leslie.
Yeah, well, I really just want to get into the questions. So let's chat.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So you've made a major life pivot. You left a high-powered legal career, a long-term, as you had said, sexless marriage to step into work that's deeply intimate and emotionally charged. So can you just take us back to that season in your life? What was the moment that made you say, I can't live like this anymore? And what led you to this work?
What was that moment? The moment was sitting across from my ex-husband at what would have been, or was actually, our 25th wedding anniversary at a restaurant in the middle of New York City, which is where we lived, and recognizing like, wow, there's nothing here. Like all we could talk about were the kids, but there was just no connection. There was nothing. We were like two strangers sitting there in silence after being married for 25 years. And I said to myself at that moment, yep, not going to be a 26th anniversary. This isn't going to happen. Like, this is really the time, the pivot that I need to transition and make this change. That was the first piece of it. Like, I had to get out of a relationship, of a marriage that wasn't serving me emotionally, physically, sexually, either one of us really. So that was the moment, when I really think back on it, of the beginning of like, okay, we're going to have to do something new.
Yeah, it's so funny because we don't realize as we go through life, especially I've been married now 29 years, just over 29 years. And there's so many different like points in our lives that we're changing. I mean, I know I started changing back when I started going through doing some personal development work. And I became this completely different version of me that didn't marry my husband. And so there was like that transition period of like, okay, he's now with somebody new who has different ideals. But even if I hadn't gone through that, we still change because we have experiences together, but also apart. And like you were saying, having the children as being like that focal point, but then what about your relationship? And there was nothing left there for you to even feel like. So I know that you had said that you'd been in this marriage for quite some time where like the intimacy, the connection really wasn't there. And I guess I have a follow-up question to that, which is, what was that, I guess, that shift that, like, I know you decided, like, okay, you're looking at this person, you're saying, we really don't have, that connection anymore. Maybe we don't even really have anything in common anymore. But what was that personal awakening for you that helps you now to find intimacy with yourself and now in partnership with someone new?
Oh, good question. I mean, honestly, I think that really took a long time for me to understand because at the time I just knew like I was miserable,
Hmm.
and it was just like all around miserable. Like, I had no emotional connection. There was no touching. There was no cuddling. We were living in separate beds. Like you, I had a couple of years before I made that decision, had started on a little bit of a personal development journey. I think that was probably what started it. I joined Unity of New York City, which was a non-denominational Unity church. And that was very like, there was a lot of like meditation and going inside and like really connecting with my intuition in that space that I'd never actually been able to see in a positive way. Like I've always been very intuitive, but I never listened to myself. Right. So that was, I think, a big piece of it. Like, who am I? What do I want? Where do I see myself in the world? I think that started there. But man, Leslie, the intimacy piece, it took like 10 years for me to actually be able to understand what intimacy was. Honestly, I think it's really only been in the last like 5 years, and especially in this new relationship, that I'm like, oh, this is what intimacy feels like. This is what it's like to really be authentic. This is what it's like to be accepted for all of who you are and to accept somebody and love them for all of who they are. I mean, that was really hard for me to understand. There was no intimacy at home. Like that was not an intimate relationship with my mom. My mom was a single mom essentially. And so nothing was ever modeled for me. So it just never was clear to me, what intimacy actually was, what it felt like, and would it be safe?
Yeah, and I think too, once we get past like that, I guess, familiar pattern of the non-connection, it's almost like you become that roommate. And it's almost like because you had other focus, like the kids, you had another focus that it was easy for you. I don't know if I would say easy, but it was just, for lack of a better way of saying it, easier for you to just be able to ignore what was happening because you had something in common that was important to both of you. And then when you got to that stage, you're like, okay, what is the next 25 years going to look like if this is, or 20, all of this, what is that going to look like for us moving forward when we no longer have the kids as being the primary focus? So I love that you shared that too, also because the intimacy too, if you, especially in the relationship that you were in, and this is the reason why I'm saying it, is that the relationship you were in, it became such a normal way of living that now when you're outside of that actual relationship, now it's like relearning. Okay, it's like, what is it supposed to feel like? What am I supposed to like? How am I supposed to respond to a person? And how am I supposed to like interact with someone in that kind of a way? And I think I love the fact that you were really open and shared that it wasn't like an overnight process. It took time to really revisit it and learn, like, what do I want and what is that going to look like? How am I supposed to feel? And looking for that partner that's going to really reflect that back to you. So yeah, I just wanted to ask that follow up because I was curious, for you after getting out of your marriage, what that journey felt like for you, like what that looked like. And talking about that specifically, since we're on that topic, I know that you're very passionate about bringing attention to what you call the sexless marriage epidemic. So women in long-term relationships who've normalized disconnection, because we've been talking about that, resentment, or even shutting down. Can you speak to what's really happening under the surface?
Yeah, for sure. So, typically under the surface, so sexless marriages, let me just start by defining, generally are considered to be relationships in which you have sex less than 10 times a year. And the numbers are pretty profound. They're like 25%, probably underreported. I'm guessing it's probably more like 35%. There's a lot of people in long-term relationships who are basically roommates. They're not lovers any longer. And I think that there's a number of problems that underlie this sexless marriage epidemic. And I think that's a fair term to use. I think one of the biggest pieces why people end up in sexless marriages is because the communication has broken down in the relationship itself. And problems around sex that show up in a relationship are generally just a symptom of bigger relationship issues outside of the bedroom. And a lot of that has to do with there being built up anger and built up resentment, and it could come from a variety of places. You could feel like there is betrayal, but it could have just been like a lot of resentment because, in one case, like I'm the one who had to stay home, have the job, take care of the kids while you were going and traveling and making all the money, right? Or making, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of reasons why resentment actually builds up, but that's a huge thing that starts to foster if it's not dealt with. And it isn't. It gets shoved under the carpet. We don't like to deal with conflict and we don't have tools to repair it. And then it ends up creating a lot of toxicity in the relationship. And it's often very hard to come back from that. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces is there's a lot of emotional disconnection. But I think there's other pieces as well. That's not the only one. There's also, again, it comes down to communication. Like we're not actually able to talk about what we want. And what's happening is, we have this first stage of relationship and sex when there's all these new relationship energy and there's all these hormones scourging through our system. But that ends. It ends after 6 to 18 months, which is totally normal. And then you're like, oh, where's the spark? What's going on? Like, I don't feel it anymore. And sex becomes routine and boring. And you don't have that like real intense erotic connection that you had in the beginning, which was really just hormone driven. I mean, there's obviously, I'm falling in love with this person, but really it's hormone driven. It's like the dopamine surging through our brains. And then it really comes down to like, well, what do we really want? And how do we want to connect? And how do we speak our desires to each other? And do we even know what our desires are? And I think that's a big problem. Lack of communication, not being able to talk about sex, expecting things to be the way they were the first 6 to 18 months, which is completely unrealistic. And then just being really frustrated. A lot of women get really bored. I think this is a thing. I know that a lot of men are totally fine. We could just do the same thing over and over. It's all good. Right. And for women, many of us are like, no, it's not good. It starts getting boring. And we need more excitement. We need more variety. We need more ways to keep our brain activated and excited and turned on.
Yeah. And one of the things I actually wanted to lean into now, because you've brought it up a little bit especially on the relationship side, if the man in the relationship is the one that's traveling a lot and that makes it really hard on the relationships, or he works a lot and makes it hard on the relationship, so he comes home tired. What about on the flip side to women who are pouring everything that they have into their business or their family, right? Because that becomes a focal point. And what I feel is if they're not careful, their intimate life can quietly fade in the background. Maybe they frame it as a necessary sacrifice or just a season of life that they're in. But when, we've been talking about this disconnection becoming normalized, from your perspective, like what are some of the hidden emotional consequences of living disconnected from intimacy and pleasure, especially when disconnection is masked by productivity or even the success of their business and the business life?
Yeah, I mean, they're so integrally related, right? Because, as a female entrepreneur, right, when your intimacy life falls apart or it's not there, then it makes it much harder to be able to be that outgoing person in your business that's attracting what you want to attract. Like, I believe very strongly that as women, our sexual center, our womb space, our ovaries, like that is the center of our creativity and our power. And when we're disconnected from that power in our business, it affects everything. It affects our health because, having a healthy sex life actually is good for our health. It helps in longevity. It helps in all of the hormones that we receive, the oxytocin, like orgasms, very powerful, but they're also good for a healthy reason. It affects our relationships with other people. And it affects our relationships with our partner as well, right? Because that is, think about it, Maslow's hierarchy, like sexuality, that's at the very, very base of the triangle, right? That's like a very, very basic human need that we need to be able to thrive and survive. And when that gets cut off, it cuts off a lot of other aspects of our relationship. And yeah, like I did it. I took all of my sexual energy and I threw it into my business. And was my business succeeding? It was okay. Was I happy? Not at all.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And especially too, what I've found, and just talking with women who, they're really busy, especially even if you're not even brand new, if you're a woman who's scaling your business, maybe you're pivoting into something else, a lot of your focus, there's timelines that you're trying to meet. And maybe part of that is that whole idea of the season I'm in. And they then look at like, okay, well, it's not that I want to ignore you, but I need to get this done already so that then I have more time for you. Not realizing that that part of it, it really is, it can really affect just the relationship by saying, it's almost like saying we as a couple or, our relationship doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And that's not what they're saying. It's not what they mean to say. But at that moment, and again, that there's where I feel like there could be resentments coming up. Like this person is demanding that attention and you're saying like, I need to do this and not looking at like how having that bond, that really strong bond is going to help you more effectively create and accomplish what you're trying to do. And so I wanted to ask that follow up, like with especially with that disconnect from the relationship, especially if it is, throwing your energy, all your energy into the business, whether you're scaling, whether you're pivoting, whatever that looks like. How is that quietly shaping how a woman is leading her life, if she is or is not setting boundaries, or how she makes decisions in other areas of her life?
Yeah. I think it affects every part of our life, right? Like the piece around setting boundaries. It is, I know it. It's super easy just to like dig in and be totally just I'm in my business and I'm scaling or I'm whatever I'm doing, but like I don't really have time. And that is putting up a boundary. You're putting up a boundary with respect to the relationship. You're basically saying to somebody else who you love, you're not really a priority for me. My business is the priority. And we have to learn how to balance both of those things. Like, right, as women entrepreneurs who are very busy and many of us have, you know, multiple businesses and multiple children that we're also trying to manage, as well as a relationship, finding that balance can be very challenging. But being able to learn how to prioritize and how to make decisions and how to lead from a place of your feminine power. And, maybe that means pulling back a little bit on going full steam ahead so that you have enough time and energy for the other important pieces of your life. Because if you start to completely disregard them, even if it's not done purposely, like this happened to me the other night, like my partner was mad at me because I was not available all day. I was just like in meetings and podcasts. And it was a problem, right? It caused some conflicts and friction. So being really aware of that and trying to lead from a more authentic space of like, I'm in the flow, but I have to put some boundaries around where that flow is going to go. Even though I might want to stay up all night and work on this proposal, maybe not a good idea, not only for my health, but also for my relationship.
Yeah, I love that you said that because people talk about I want the time freedom, I want of course the financial freedom, but I want to be able to spend quality time, that's why I'm working towards this. Well, again, you can become disconnected if you're building that and you're just saying not right now, you're not a priority, and then thinking that at the end of the rainbow and everything is all, full, like, you've got everything all together and you created this great business, but now your relationship is in tatters because you didn't take care of that. And I think it's really easy and I'm not saying this from a perspective of that we do it intentionally, but it is important. I really truly believe it is important that we take that time to be aware of what we're doing. And this is not just for women, this is for men too. I think men also, when they are going after their success in their careers or businesses, sometimes that there is that sacrifice and they say, well, I'm sacrificing this so that you can have that. But it's like, no, what you're doing is you're sacrificing the relationship and that's not healthy. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of the things you talk about and you say is that safety, not desire, is the foundation of true intimacy. So what does that actually look like in a long-term relationship, especially for women who may not even know what safe feels like in their body?
And that is such a problem. And so many women don't know what safe feels like in their body. But, emotional safety is really the core of a successful, healthy, long term relationship. Because if you are emotionally safe with your partner, then you can actually open up and you can be vulnerable and you can be authentic and you can share feelings and you can even share feelings that are going to hurt them because that is part of what happens in relationships, right? Like we hurt each other, we hurt the people we love, and that's fine and that's normal as long as you know how to like repair it. But that can't
Hmm.
happen unless there is actually emotional safety. And emotional safety, it actually creates desire. Like when you feel emotionally safe with your partner, then you're in a space where you're open to being more vulnerable sexually. Like you can open yourself up as well when you're able to create that emotional safety. But it requires communication, it requires a lot of trust. It requires repairing past hurts. Like you've got to know that, if I'm going to want to be in an emotionally safe and open relationship, I have to know that we have a way to be able to repair when we have conflicts. Otherwise, resentments do build up, right? And that completely blocks us from feeling emotionally connected and emotionally safe.
Yeah, I love that. I want to move into your retreats because you have the passionate intimacy retreats that you have led over 100 couples through. So, can you give us a glimpse into what actually happens in that kind of setting and what kind of breakthrough that some of the couples have walked away with?
Yeah, for sure. So I do retreats. I have a very different process. I'm not a couples therapist, as you know, I'm a coach. And I have a very different process where I like to work with couples over an intensive 4 to 5 day period, private one on one in Asheville, North Carolina, which is where I live. And the reason that I have found this to be very successful is because there's a big difference between seeing somebody once a week and seeing somebody over a 15-hour period of time over several days where we can actually process what's actually happening in real time. And, I would say that I always start with helping couples create the emotional safety and the emotional connection, helping them understand what empathy feels like in their body and taking them through some of those exercises around empathy. And then also teaching them what it means to be attuned to your partner. This is a huge piece that, again, that happens, especially when there are couples that have mismatched desire. There's not attunement to each other. So one person wants to go really fast and the other person wants to go really slow, and they can't find a rhythm to connect with each other because they're not even connected to their self and their body. And over this like 4-day period, we work first with communication and creating emotional safety, depending upon where this couple is. So, for example, I just had a couple here for 5 days. They've been married for, I don't know, 15 years, I think. And they were like on the verge of separation, which is very typical. I often get people on the verge of separation. And we really spent a lot of time on helping them to repair a lot of the past hurts that have happened in the relationship, to explore disappointment, because, at least 20% of a relationship is a disappointment. But here's the thing, if in fact you know together how to process that disappointment, that's the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship. And so for this couple, like helping them really learn, like, oh, yeah, we're going to disappoint each other and we've disappointed each other, but I'm going to be here with you in your disappointment and I'm going to give you empathy for it, was a huge turning point for them. And they left actually having had some sex again, which they hadn't had in months, maybe even a year, and feeling more emotionally connected. So not only are we working on the emotional connection side and the repair piece, which most therapists don't actually do a good job of teaching, but we're also working on the physical connection as well. So my retreats are very interactive, right? Meaning that I'm teaching couples different types of touch, different ways to touch each other. And then they get to try that and experiment and work with it. We look at different sexual styles. Are you more sensual? Are you more sexual? Are you more into like kinky play? Right? And understanding those differences and how you can integrate them with each other. So they get to really explore in real time. And then I get to see what the block is, what the trigger is. Like, oh, that just triggered you. I can see you just shut down. What's happening? Right. And so that's a huge help for them to actually see what's going on in real time and then start to unpack it and heal it, whatever is happening, whatever is showing up.
I love that you talked about the empathy side of it, because I think a lot of times when couples, I mean, I'll just use myself as an example. If I've had, not necessarily an argument, but a discussion that can escalate quickly because possibly feeling like my husband might not understand and is not expressing that empathy towards me, that compassion towards me. And I have felt sometimes, well, it's not my position, it's not my job to teach you how to do that. But on the flip side to that, I want to be also be empathetic and understanding that maybe he doesn't know how to do that. And so being that example of showing like, okay, I'm listening to you so I understand how you are seeing this, what your perspective is, and then being able to hopefully have that conversation saying, well, this is what I would like from you, which I've had those conversations, which has been really great. But I know that it can be really hard, especially with that empathy piece, because you want to be right. Like you don't want you want your opinion to be right, even in the relationships that you've been around with someone for decades. You want to be the one that's always right. But being always right then just means that there's no movement and no growth in the relationship. I mean, that's how I noticed what I noticed. And again, like as I was saying, I went through my personal development journey and I decided that instinctively that I can't change this person's behavior, but I can change mine and my perception and how I show up in the world. And then from example and being that empathetic person and being compassionate and showing that there's a different side, a different way, and then being able to be open and understanding to listen before I'm responding, to be able to have that conversation to say, hey, this is what I would like in return. That I think is probably some of the conversations you've had with your clients, is like teaching them like you need to be able to listen. It must be like, because otherwise, like you were saying, the couple that just left, for 15 years of being married is a long time. And if you are not willing to listen to what the other person has to say, like even their perspective, without making it wrong, because that can also be easy to do, just wanting to make it wrong. Then there's not going to be any growth. And so I love that you do this because I think it's important. It's not just about the physical side of it. It's also the emotional side. It's how we talk to each other. That communication piece is so important, and being open to the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree, right?
I think
Even
that's
if you
true.
don't.
I think that's true. And I want to say about that just happened in this session last week. The man was like, I'm really bad at empathy. And I'm like, yeah, most men are. You weren't taught to be empathetic. You weren't socialized. This was a guy running a big business, very strong, powerful person, right? Like that's not anything that you were taught. Many women are pretty good at empathy, right? I think that's a skill that we learn in the caring professions and the helping professions and being even a parent, right? A mom. But it's really, really challenging. And it's incredibly important because, I like to say when people are fighting, it's not you're fighting about the facts. You think you're fighting about the facts. You think you're fighting about the perspective, but you're really fighting about like there's an emotional conversation underneath that. And that's the piece that you have to actually get to. That's the only way to actually repair is to be able to identify what's the conversation under the conversation. What are you hurt about? What am I hurt about? Can we express that to each other? Can we be empathetic and say like, oh, yeah, I can see, like, I really hurt you. That must be terrible. That's
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
We all want to be seen. And that's feeling like you're being seen when somebody actually says those words and believes that to be true.
Yeah. I think one of the things that always comes to mind for me is whenever I think about there was that movie with Jennifer Aniston, and I think Vince Vaughn was the male lead, and it was called The Breakup. And people would think, well, they broke up over him not bringing home lemons, but it was a deeper conversation. And that's really, there was something broken before the lemons, right? And so, I mean, again, those conversations can escalate into something completely, you think that that's what you're fighting about, but it's not. It's something deeper. So I love that you brought that up. So, for the woman who's listening, final question. She's outwardly successful, but she's privately craving a deeper connection with her partner. What's one belief she may need to release to finally experience the intimacy and fulfillment she wants?
That's a great question. I think a belief that she may need to release to actually experiencing the intimacy that she wants. That's an interesting thing. I'm just thinking about that. Okay, here's what I think the belief is. I think the belief is that my partner doesn't really want to show up for me the way I want them to show up for me. I think a lot of women believe that our partners they don't want to show up for us the way we want them to show up. Either they don't want to or they can't, right? My partner really just can't be present with me. It's impossible. And I think that is a false belief. It's just that they don't know how to. Everything around intimacy, the emotional part, the energetic part, the physical part, it can all be learned. I think that's one of the things that people really don't understand. It's not like you're born being an amazing lover, right? Or you're born being like, this caring person. Like all of these are skills that we're learned, we're socialized. And I think we need to understand as women and be compassionate that, our partners are trying to do the best they can. Like they really want to please you. Generally speaking, that is true. But a lot of times they actually don't know how to do it. They don't know how to show up for you. They don't know how to touch you in the way in which you actually really want to be touched. It's not like they're not trying or they don't want to do it. And we've got to really give a lot of compassion and kindness to all of the men in the world who really are trying hard, but don't have the skills to do it. They can be taught, but they don't have the skills.
Yeah. And just be open and just ask for what you want. Because, I mean, they can't read your mind. And I think a lot of the times, like, well, he should know me. And it's like, well, yeah. And then he could say, well, she should know me. And it's like, well, no, yes, you know each other, but there's still parts of you that might have changed over the years. Like, if you don't continuously share, the growth together is not going to move the way you hope. So, Xanet, I am so excited and thrilled that you were able to join me today. Thank you so much for spending time with me. And I loved listening to your story about just where you were and like to what got you where you are. I love the fact that, again, in the beginning, you said, listen, it took me 10 years to really understand that the whole intimacy piece because, I had lost it for such a long time. Again, that's just saying like, hey, I'm human first, right? But I chose to take that journey to learn about it. So I really love that. And I've also really loved, especially when you talk about what you do at the retreats, it's not just about the physical side of things. It's really important. I believe as women, I mean, for myself, at least I know that I have to have that emotional connection for that physical connection to really thrive. That's just how I'm wired. And probably most women are wired that way, but I don't want to speak for other women. I just know for myself. Yeah. So I really love that, that what you shared today, again, about that whole emotional connection and teaching them to be able to honor each other, being able to listen, to be empathetic, to be compassionate, kind to each other, to actually share what their needs are, allowing for a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. So yeah, I am just excited and I'm just so thrilled that you were able to join me today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Leslie. It's been delightful.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you'd like to connect with Xanet directly or learn more about her retreats, coaching, or her upcoming book, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit, you can find her contact information in the show notes. Remember, intimacy isn't something we earn after everything else is handled. It's something we're meant to experience alongside the life we're building. Whether it's emotional, physical, or spiritual connection, it begins by honoring your needs, your desires, and your right to feel fully alive in your life. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Ever thought about starting your own podcast?
Do you have a business or a message you want to share with the world?
Well, now it's easier than ever with Electricast. Hi, I'm Mark Netter.
And I'm Peter Rafelson. We're the founders of Electricast Media.
Whether you want to start a new podcast or already have one, join Electricast to grow your audience, monetize your content, and build your community.
With our simple sign-up, you get free promotion, world-class analytics, premium ads, and personal support.
Go to electricast.com and join our community today.
Electricast. Transform your influence.
Electricast. You deserve better healthcare, and so do we all. Medicine in America is a podcast that shares real stories of patients and doctors reshaping the future, because the revolution in care isn't coming, it's already here. Real stories, real change, a better future for healthcare.
Electricast. Electricast.